The mechanic dropped his wrench, not from the clatter of metal, but from the sound that came from behind him. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shouting. It was crying. He turned, and there, in the middle of his oil-stained garage, was a billionaire woman on her knees. She was shaking, sobbing, clutching her disabled daughter as if the girl might just vanish into thin air. People would look back on this day and call it a miracle. But what froze everyone in that very moment, what made the air thick and unbreathable, was this single, undeniable fact. The mechanic hadn't even touched the girl. There was no doctor in sight, no futuristic machine, no complex surgery. And yet, the little girl had just moved her foot for the first time in 3 long years, through a storm of tears. The mother whispered a question that hung in the greasy air. How did you do what millions of dollars couldn't? The mechanic swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat. The truth was something so unexpected, so raw, that no one would ever believe it. The billionaire mother slowly got to her feet, her eyes scanning the garage as if seeing it for the first time. The cracked concrete floor, stained with years of work, the toolboxes, rusted at the edges, and the man standing before her, in worn gloves, looking like life had already wrung him dry and left him out to hang. Meanwhile, the little girl just stared at her own foot. It was trembling, moving again just an inch, but that inch was enough to rewrite her entire future. "Mom," she whispered, her voice a tangled mess of fear and hope. "I can feel it. I can feel my foot." A flash of panic crossed the mechanic's face. He took a step back, his hands held up as if to ward off the impossible. "Please," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't mean for this to happen." That's when the mother lunged forward and grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Fresh tears streamed down her face. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking with every word. "We've been everywhere, the best specialists in Switzerland. Cutting-edge clinics in Japan, private hospitals so exclusive that most people don't even know they exist." Her voice cracked completely. "And none of them, not a single one, could do what you just did in 5 minutes." The mechanic closed his eyes, bracing himself. He knew that if she found out why her daughter could suddenly feel her legs, she would never look at him the same way again. He had to explain, but how? He started slowly, choosing his words with the same care he used to fix a delicate engine. He insisted he wasn't a miracle worker. He was just a guy trying to fix an old hydraulic lift in the corner of his shop. The girl's wheelchair, he explained, had just happened to roll closer to where he was working. As the lift's motor hummed, he noticed something. He saw the way her legs had a tiny, almost imperceptible reaction to the vibration traveling through the concrete floor. It was something no doctor had ever thought to test, something no multi-million-dollar machine had ever tried to simulate. It was just a simple vibration from an old engine, acting on pure instinct, the way he always did with broken things. He knelt beside her wheelchair. He didn't think of who stacked it. He adjusted the angle of her chair, shifting it slightly to catch the frequency just right. And in that instant, the girl gasped. Sensation. A jolt of feeling where there had been nothing for years. The mother collapsed to her knees again, but this time, it wasn't from despair. It was from the overwhelming, terrifying weight of hope. But the mechanic didn't smile. He couldn't. Because hope had cost him everything once before. Years ago, he hadn't been a mechanic covered in grease. He had been a biomedical engineering prodigy, not from a wealthy family, but his mind was brilliant, a shining star in his field. He had walked away from that entire world when his wife died. He left it behind because hospitals, once places of healing, had become monuments to his failure and pain. He chose to work on engines instead, because machines were simple. Machines didn't cry when you failed to fix them. And now, standing there in the quiet of his garage, he realized he couldn't hide from his past any longer. The life he had so carefully buried was right here, staring back at him. The billionaire mother listened to his whole story in complete silence. There was no interruption, no arrogance, just a woman, a mother, hearing for the very first time that her daughter's future might not be permanently locked behind a cold, clinical diagnosis. That night, she didn't offer him money. She didn't write a check or talk about contracts. She offered him something far more valuable, her trust. Over the next few weeks, She came back. Quietly. There were no cameras, no reporters, no headlines. It was just a mother, a daughter, and a mechanic in a dusty garage. They experimented with vibrations, with different angles, with subtle motions. They were just tiny wins, small sparks of progress, but they added up to something no doctor had ever dared to promise. One afternoon, on that same cold, concrete floor, the girl took her first assisted step. And in that moment, the mechanic, the man who thought he had no tears left, cried harder than anyone. If you're still watching this story halfway through, it means something in it resonated with you. Maybe you're watching from a bustling city or a quiet town, from completely different walks of life. But we're all connected by that same feeling of hope. Just take a moment to remember that. Months later, the scene changed. The girl, now walking completely on her own, stepped into her mother's sleek corporate office. The billionaire mother, surrounded by her entire board of directors, looked at her daughter and completely broke down. Not because of the miracle, but because, for the first time, she truly understood what real value looked like. She shut down one of her most profitable luxury development projects, and with that funding, she built something new. A free rehabilitation center, modeled after a mechanic's garage. There were no marble floors, no expensive art, no big egos. It was just a place filled with people who knew how to listen, who knew how to see potential where others saw a lost cause. And the mechanic, he didn't become famous. He didn't go on talk shows or have his face on magazines. He stayed exactly who he was, a man who fixed what others had given up on. And every single time a child took their first step in that center, he'd wipe his greasy hands on a rag, smile a little, and say the same 5 words. Broken doesn't mean finished. If this story moved you, I hope you'll take a second at the end right now to help others find it too. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Stories like this one grow and spread when people see a piece of themselves inside them. Because sometimes the greatest miracles don't come from the billionaires or the headlines. They come from the quiet, everyday people who simply never stopped caring. Thanks for watching.